Good afternoon, network and networks, plural. Thanks for joining us. This is Recruiting EQ episode 47, the personal branding episode. I was going to call it part one because I'm sure there's going to be many, but I thought it was gauche. We don't know how many there's going to be. Part a million. Um, Joining us is the lovely Julie Robinson and the lovely Emma Middlehurst today. Thanks for joining us, guys. Before we go around the room with quick intros, I'll do my usual disclaimer. Thank you to everyone in advance for all the participation. We usually get some great comments on this program. We are not on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're watching this. So you cannot communicate with us directly, but you can send us comments in the comment section. We'll happily address them in lulls in the conversation. We're not going to be naming names in the interest of privacy because this is during the workday. I don't want to get you in trouble. There you have it. Disclaimer done. Personal branding intros. You guys, who wants to start?
I can start if you like.
Go for it.
It's funny. I actually just looked down and my title says Senior Recruitment Consultant because that's what I put. But my full title is Senior Recruitment and Marketing Consultant. The reason I didn't do that is because it would be like on this lovely screen. But half of my job is it's socials, it's branding. So when I'm not recruiting and talking to our candidates and our clients, I'm figuring out how we can connect better with both of those groups of people and everyone in between. So I've been with RGC for 2.5 years, just over actually, in various capacities, but most recently kind of in a 360 recruiter slash marketing extraordinaire. That's totally said facetiously.
Everything that you could possibly do, Emma, is what you do, actually, right?
Perfect. Yeah, a little bit of everything. That is me. Yeah, and we all work remotely. So for those of us who are joining on an international basis, I'm just north of Toronto, hence the accent, a little bit of a rural Canadian accent going on. And yeah, that's me. Julie, what about you?
Perfect. So thanks, Emma. Thank you, Rick. So I'm Julie Robinson, co-founder of Raymond George Consultancy. And from a branding perspective, that's probably something that is my weaker spot. So something that I'm pretty uncomfortable with. And from a personal perspective, so I think it might be interesting, this conversation. And so the opportunity to talk about this, I think, is brilliant. And I think could have massive impact on lots of people, including us. And that's the whole point, right? That is the whole point. So the strength of the brand is the benefit. So that's me. And I do all of the other stuff that other folks don't do on the team, or some of that too.
Indeed you do. Indeed you do. And I'm Rick. I host this event every Wednesday. I work as the VP of Business Development for Raymond George for going on 6 years now. Crazy. Time flies. And yeah, I've done a bunch of other stuff. Tech sales. I used to be in the music business. I used to be on the radio. Definitely saw a lot of personal branding on the music business. That's something that I will go into a little bit as we go into this too, is I feel like what happened to the music business about midway into my career. And I say music business, like literally, like, I mean, I owned a record label. I had music lawyers. I was, a factor juror. So not just someone who played guitar in my bedroom. No offense to the people who are doing that. But I'm saying on the business side, there were a lot of changes that occurred while I was doing that stuff. And I feel like those similar things I am seeing in staffing and recruiting and a lot of business as well, as social media sort of creeps in and the expectations of personal branding seem to be a little bit everywhere now, all over business as well. Hence the personal branding episode. My God, it's about time, eh? Why didn't we do this episode like a long time ago?
I don't know, Julia, the idea, we have to give credit to you, I think, for this one, don't we?
We do.
And you know what? This has been super, well, very relevant for a long time. But I think it's it's still something which is relevant because people don't necessarily do as much as they possibly could from a branding perspective or from a personal branding perspective, because I think things have actually changed over the last, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 years. I think it always used to be sort of like company brand, and we all sort of stood behind the company brand in some way, all marching in the same direction. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now really it's actually about individuals. They are the brand, and always were actually. But it was, I think, an evolving thing. So yeah, so why I brought it up is because I think that that's my heritage. It's like, okay, we were all like behind this facade of something blue and white, green and yellow, pink and orange, whatever it is in terms of the story. But actually, we have to move on, and if you haven't, you have to. So that's why I thought, because I think we are doing that with the help of Emma and Rick, and actually everyone on the team, which is fantastic. But I think we could do even more faster. And I think that we really need to get on that boat. And so do other people. So that's why I thought it was relevant to talk about it, because I think that, well, those reasons is like, you may have missed the memo or got the memo but not really read it, and you need to read it and you need to do something about it.
Yep, for sure. Well, and so before we get heavy into it, I think that there's sort of two camps in which we have observed just in our day-to-day of our job. We've got, years of sort of empirical evidence of dealing with companies and individuals on two sides of the coin where personal branding has changed, evolved, and become important, and would be good to sort of share, I guess, what we're seeing is working for people or not working for people. On the personal branding front, for those who are job seekers trying to find a job, whether you're unemployed or not, like trying to be noticed, stand out from the pile, get the job you want. Personal branding, particularly in staffing, but probably kind of everywhere right now, hiring managers are looking at it. So that's one avenue where we can talk about what our findings are. And then after that, maybe we could look at, personal branding from either a sales perspective, or if you're a recruiter, an agency recruiter, or in-house, like how does that work for candidate attraction, et cetera, or just to sort of excel in your current job. How does personal branding elevate what you've got going on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I just from a sort of someone trying to find an opportunity, and these are sort of like very basic tips here for a second. And I think it's fair to say that whenever you're applying for a job, and certainly as recruiters, this is what our clients do, within a millisecond of receiving someone's name or whiff that they're interested in an opportunity with the client, the first thing that they'll do, and everyone knows this, or if you don't, you should, is go to your LinkedIn profile. So that's where the most recent Rolodex of folks exist. And that's what people look at within a heartbeat. So that has to have certain things on it, which again, hopefully most people know, but it has to have certain things on it. And if it doesn't, then you are immediately sort of devalued in some way, rightly or wrongly, but immediately devalued in terms of sort of someone's, are they going to stay there more than 5-6 seconds if those things aren't present. So I think that we all probably know what those are, but I'll go through some of them. Please do feel free to add if you want to. I mean, obviously, people will look at a picture. They'll look at a graphic, and if it's of your cat or your dog, okay. That's absolutely fine. But it would be almost sort of better if it was of you, and it's a smart looking something that's presented in a, sort of as polished type of way as you can get. So a professional looking picture, in my opinion, that's clear, that's, somewhat relevant, as in like you can see the person sort of, fairly close, to not miles away in the background, and also current, like some sort of current picture would be fantastic. We did have a situation actually with a particular gentleman that will remain nameless, and you create an impression of folks when you see a picture, and the impression that one particular individual created wasn't brilliant. By changing the picture of him, he created an entirely different impression, and fortunately or unfortunately, people's impressions count, and you have a very short period of time to make an impression. So if the graphic of you is fabulous, great, job done. If it's not, you know what, you're sort of devaluing yourself in some sort of way, which we unfortunately all make judgment. So I think that you have to have some sort of graphic which is current, present, and as polished as you can get it there. It doesn't have to be professional, but you totally need to have that. You also need to have, or I think it's better, and Rick, we also went through some training a number of years ago around sort of someone's journey. So a journey of sorts to explain your journey that is personal would be better, if you can. So not necessarily like the cookie cutter, cut and paste, ABC company I work at that does XYZ, and it's like, if there's some sort of intent around, I've actually tried to make this personal and spent some time on here, I think that impression then is better rather than just the cut and paste. If I worked at this company, that company, and this company, and they do blah, 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 and it's just a cut and paste from a website. I think that's, that's very generic. And to your point, Rick, the more ungeneric, is that a word? How about unique? The more unique, ungeneric, let's put that into you like that one? Yeah. If we can put that into the dictionary, so ungeneric, the more ungeneric you are, the better. So the more personal you are, the better, and the more unique you are, the better, because we are all unique. So the better representation that you can put there, fantastic. Okay, over to you. I'll pass the baton. Add some more. Let's add some more.
Perfect.
Well, on the backs of what you were saying there, Julie, for a sec about the photo too, I do think that yes, it should be clear and it should be current as well. I don't think you're helping yourself by trying to. You're like, oh, I'm now in my 40s and I gained 50 pounds during COVID, like some people, and so I'm going to show a picture of myself in my 20s where I was thinner, and it doesn't really help you because you're going to have to see these people eventually, right? Like, so it should be a current photo and clear. You know what I mean? Like, there's no sense in trying to curb the truth, I think. But like a current clear photo, and also it should match the tone of what your career is. If you're going to be going to a creative agency, don't wear a 3-piece suit that looks like you work for a bank, and vice versa, right? Like it maybe seems obvious to say that, but I've certainly seen, people who are wearing a suit in their LinkedIn photo because they think they have to, but they're going for something that's a little bit more in IT or whatever else that's a little more chill. You're not going to seem like you fit. So like it also, it's personal and it should feel natural and be authentic, but it also has to make sense with what you're doing. And if you're somebody who likes to wear a 3-piece suit and look like you're at a bank, then why are you applying to? Like, there's a lot of soul searching that weirdly happens during these exercises, like with that one that you said that we did, Julie, where they proposed that in the about section on the LinkedIn, it's almost like I had gotten this same advice early in my recruiting training to tell people what to do for cover letters, right? They're like, we're an agency, so we don't need cover letters. We are the cover letter, right? But if people ask you, or if they ask you for advice, my training on the cover letter was, don't write a generic sort of paragraph form of your resume. That's silly. No, that's why people don't read cover letters, because it's just a repeat of whatever, and it's like you're trying to show your language skills or flowery whatever, but it's just boring. It's all the information's there in point form. There's no point in doing that. What the cover letter should be is why you want the job. It's like the narrative. What I did this, and this is why I'm choosing to do this now. This is why it makes sense for me, so that they get to see a little bit of you, the individual, and know why you want the job, why you're in the industry you're in, what do you like about it, what didn't you like before that led you down this path in sort of a genuine way. And to treat the about section that way, I personally took a long time to soul search and be like, why do I like recruiting even? Like, why? I was, working
sales. It wasn't that long, Rick. I mean, hopefully you sort of did manage to come up with that like fairly quickly.
But I always said, and funny the way I worded it before, but I always used to just say like, yeah, surprisingly, I couldn't believe I fell in love with recruiting, and I just left it at that. But that's not really a narrative, right? And it ended up being that it's just kind of like, I think I just love stories. I love people's stories. I love the narrative aspect. I love knowing why they chose the jobs they chose. Why did they like them or not like them or succeed for real when they open up to you? And then helping them to do the logical next step and be part of that narrative. And putting that down is relevant, it's personal, it's true, it's authentic, right? I'm not making up some fancy story. So there is a little bit of soul searching, I think, to go in there to sort of even decide the why yourself for the narrative. But man, does it help? It helps you interview better, I think, if you have that clarity, because you can articulate these things in an interview. Like it all ties in, the personal branding approach versus that generic, I did this, these were my numbers, I had this job, I moved, so I went to another job. They had layoffs, so whatever. That's everyone, and I think the age of that working is quickly passing us.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. There is a place for that on your profile, and it's down at your work experience.
Yeah.
Right. There's an opportunity every time you write a job title to give bullet points of your successes, your summaries, your president's club, whatever it may be, what you contributed to the company. But that about section, it's not about the job; it's about you. So I don't want to hear about X, Y, and Z. Yes, if you happen to get a President's Club, sure, add it in. But it needs to be a little more personal than that, in my opinion. And I think that the people that keep it personal experience a lot more success. At least that's what we see in this industry specifically.
I think another couple of things to mention that employers will look at, because I think that's important. If you're going for a sales job, as an example, whichever sales job it is, so if it's in staffing or in in any other industry, one of the major tools, whether we like it or not, in our world is LinkedIn. So from a networking perspective, and especially if you're in staffing, it's I wouldn't say everything, but it's fairly close. So there's a very high proportion of people that spend a lot of time on LinkedIn from a networking perspective. So if you're in a sales role, then the likelihood is that you should have a lot of connections. And if you have been in staffing for a good period of time, and even if it's on the candidate side, if you have a low number of connections, unless you're new to the geography or something like that, you should have a pretty developed network. And this is one thing that some clients, from a staffing perspective, will question. If they look at your LinkedIn and everything else looks great, but if you've got 150 connections, which they can see, it's like, okay, so how is this person actually selling, and where is their network? So I think that is something to be cognizant of if you're applying for that type of role or interested in that type of role or any sales role. If you can demonstrate where your network is and it's not on LinkedIn, okay, great, good for you. But you may not get that far because a client might have made judgment that you don't have a network.
Yeah. Yeah. On that note, I actually had this conversation with a junior in the space yesterday, and they asked my opinion on their LinkedIn. I felt comfortable enough to share my open and honest opinion after our conversation. And one of it is, if your connections are under 500, it tells you the number. If it's over 500, just says 500 plus. Doesn't matter whether it's 500, 5,000, whatever. Get yourself to that 500 number, because then you're in a club, an unspoken club of well-connected. When you get into the thousands, maybe change your account to a creator account so you can see the followers and have people click follow instead of connect. There's a lot of intricacies behind the scenes if you're in a sales role and you spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. But if you're just on LinkedIn, a typical user, maybe you're even recruiting blue collar workers who are nowhere near LinkedIn, connect with fellow staffers professionals. They are on there. They'll connect back with you. But get yourself to that 500, because it really does make a difference. I think subconsciously as recruiters, when we see a number, we know it's less than 500.
Yep.
As soon as you see 500, you're like, well connected. Join the party.
10,000, we don't know. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and that kind of brings me, I think, to the topic of where I see the similarities that have been happening over the past few years in recruiting and staffing and whatever, the way that LinkedIn has changed, the way that people look at socials differently compared to 20 years ago when I was in the music business. And the way that I was able to differentiate myself was I had a lot of people who were in the music business in my family. They didn't help me out at all, but I didn't feel like those people were intangible and I knew how to talk to them. So I spent a lot of time speaking to venue owners, people who reviewed music, CD duplication places, other labels, businesses. So yes, I played music, but I also spent a lot of times talking to those people and working on the actual product, the music itself. So I was really catering it to those people more than fans. I figured this is what we need to get ourselves in front of everybody, because that's the way that it was structured in the 90s. I was pretty young when I got going on this. It was still the 90s, right? There was no internet, there was nothing. So the power was still in having connections with venue owners and labels and radio people and whatever. That was the power. And I would do sticker campaigns when I went out and whatever, instead of just having drinks with other people who were musicians and fans and whatever. I did that for years. And we were able to differentiate ourselves in our various bands because that was an edge. Most people who were 18, 17, even years old, not supposed to be in bars at that age, but you know what I mean? We're out having fun with their friends and inviting their friends to the shows. Whereas I was trying to get showcased with other bands and so on, right? That was the way it worked. The big differentiator was Facebook. 2006 changed everything. All of the work that I had done had nothing to do with getting followers on Facebook at all, right? So I had ignored that completely. Then we were talking to venue owners and they would, or whatever, and be like, why are they not getting back to us? We sent our press package, right? Pardon me, which was the old world way of doing it. Press package meant nothing anymore. It's we have 10 followers on Facebook. Of course, we're not going to book you guys. We were on the cover of the newspaper. Like we have CD reviews, we have fans, and they're like, I don't know, that's the main metric now is Facebook followers. So here, all of the work that we had done, because the things that people were looking at were not the same things any longer, I had to beg, borrow, and steal and go over their head to older people who knew how to look at our press pack, right? And that started to make me fall out of love with the music business, because I was like, this is just a pure popularity contest. They didn't even want to listen to the music. They just wanted to look at the number of followers, assuming that you don't have a ton of followers if your music sucks. So it's not totally shallow, but at the same time, I'm starting to sort of get the same sense that that's where things are going in terms of the job search and in terms of business, right? If someone's going to work with you as a recruiter, if they look at your LinkedIn and you want them to work with you, you're headhunting them, they're going to choose somebody who, again, is well connected, has lots of activity, and is personal to the point that they like you. There's a certain bravery with kind of expressing things about yourself, because the fear is always, well, what if people don't like the team that I like, the album I like to listen to, that I love to ski, this person hates skiing, whatever, right? Like you're going to alienate people. But I think you need to alienate some to win over others. Like you can't, staying neutral is kind of not even ever getting past point A in today's kind of market. You got to take that leap of faith.
And just on that note, Rick, too, I think that some organisations also do look at activity. So having your postage, your postcard, sort of saying this is who I am and this is what I do and this is where I've been and all that type of stuff. But then if you're inactive with that, it creates some sort of impression. If you're active, it will create a different type of impression. And then if you're active, what are you active with?
Yes.
So what is it that you seem to express interest in? What is it that you seem to post? What is it you're saying? Look, yeah, because that also gives you a picture of who that person is, right? So then it makes it also more authentic, right? So back to that authenticity route. So what's your opinion on whatever it is, and how does that jive with whatever opinion I might have, or could we debate that type of thing? So I think it all gives a footprint of, this is the person that might show up to interview, if we're talking from an interview perspective. And is that what I might be looking for?
Yeah.
Yep. And it can't just be quantity either. I think that the forwarding things doesn't really count. Yes, it's activity to forward other people's things, but this is really about being out there yourself, whether it's text, photo, or preferably video because of online. It's people, like you're saying, getting to know you, the person, a little bit, even though some people may not like you. So there is a certain bravery to have to come to it.
Yeah.
But it's not just activity for the sake of it, where you're sharing other people's things. It's participating in the conversation, or even being willing to start a conversation by putting yourself out there, which is a little scarier, but the rewards are huge. The rewards are huge in today's market, I would say.
Agreed. And I think I think it is actually sort of 90% about being brave, because it's, I don't know that people obsess about what you actually do say. They may make a judgment, a very quick judgment, but then they'll quickly move on. So whatever you did say, if it was controversial, 5 minutes time, they've probably forgotten about it. So that bravery aspect is probably more in your head and my head, honestly, than anyone else's head. And I think if you can get past that, it actually doesn't really matter. And it's really then, I think, falls into the bucket of marketing, that any good marketing is good marketing, any bad marketing is still marketing. So in my opinion, but I am not the chief marketing officer in this organization. Emma, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, great question. I've been an excellent listener, which I typically am a talker. So this is good, changing hands on the roles. I'd say the only thing I would caution people, and I've seen this a little more to our friends from the South specifically, is if you're going to be controversial, that's totally okay, but don't be inflammatory. I think LinkedIn's become a little bit of a place where people feel maybe slightly too comfortable saying things that are actually problematic, and or like cussing other content creators out, or saying, you're so wrong, I can't believe blah, 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 blah. It's still a positive space. So it is a professional space. It's a positive space. Be mindful of what you're liking, what you're interacting with, and how you're speaking towards other people, because it's the internet and it goes everywhere. It never disappears. But yeah, take a little risk. Like, it doesn't have to be bland and boring and sad. I try and wear fun outfits. I try and show my coffee where I'm working. I try and demonstrate, that you can travel and work. And then that's controversial. Like, oh, working from home, XYZ, but it's not as controversial as saying, like, this
Yeah.
is my belief in the whatever amendment, right? So you'd be a little bit a little bit mindful, right? It is not Facebook, it is LinkedIn. Um, but yeah, like all press can be good press, as long as you're not going to put yourself in a position where you should be honestly probably fired for what you're saying. That's
Yeah.
what I'd caution, because I've seen quite the characters on LinkedIn. They live in Facebook, they live in LinkedIn, so you got to be a little bit mindful of interacting with those people, even if you're not interacting with a post that they've made about XYZ, but they are known to be a character that associates with XYZ. You want to be careful interacting with their page at all.
Yeah, that's a good point. We should qualify the word brave too, right? Because picking fights and being super negative and hateful or aligning yourself with those people will also reflect on hiring managers who will look at your stuff then too and be like, is this person gonna create conflict in the office or whatever, or clients or whatever. So you do have to absolutely be careful. And it's not about being brave to pick fights and be hateful. It's about being brave to be personal and talk about yourself, which is often sometimes harder. It's actually weirdly safe to pick fights because then
Yeah.
you're just speaking about ideas and not about yourself. You're not on the line at all. That's not my idea of being brave. Being brave would be like sharing about your personal thoughts, feelings, opinions about you without it being just like bandwagoning some ideology. You know what I mean? There's a great quote from this writer, Junot Diaz, who won a Genius Grant in 2008, Pulitzer Prize for his first novel. Like, just popped out of nowhere. This guy is a teacher at MIT now, and it's that I'm paraphrasing, but I'll put it in the comments. It's something along the lines of when you can say something extremely specific about yourself, like an anecdote or a detail, it becomes universal. Because at the core, when you get down to the minutia of it, people are kind of the same. We have the same fears, we have the same desires, we have the same hopes, we have the same disappointments. So it becomes a universal thing that humans can relate to. That's where you get relatable. When you get down to, you find a granular detail about yourself or a little anecdote, people can relate to it. When you go general, it's not relatable in that deep human way. It just gets washed away in the sea of other kind of details. And it's that kind of thing. I think that kind of bravery, I think, is what works personally.
Yeah.
I have to ask a question. So did you just know that, Rick, or did you happen to do some research on that? Because I'm just going to say that if anyone needs anybody on a Trivial Pursuit team, you are the guy. You are the guy, right? First pick.
Yeah,
100%.
yes. What's that?
100%.
100%.
Yeah, trivia. What is it? Activate trivia hoops.
Yeah,
Rick would know all between Rick and Renee. I'm like, I can just sit here and look pretty. This is great. They know all the answers.
that's not true. You were killing it on the science questions.
Oh, that's true. I had the science locked down, but pop culture, I was like, Rick, what do you got?
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
So going back to sort of like the bravery and the different channels or mediums or sort of platforms that we have, Emma, what's your thought on sort of who you are and how you should show up on different channels, or is there a difference?
Yes. Strong answer. Yes, there is a difference. My personal channels that I have are not the same content that I would share on my work channels, even though it's my personal LinkedIn page. So my personal Instagram page, my personal TikTok are separate from my work personal LinkedIn and work personal TikTok. And it isn't because I'm two different people and I'm like flipping back and forth. It's just about the audience, right? You need to always be mindful of your audience.
Yep.
So my personal Instagram is private. It is for my friends and family. And or people I meet on the travels and go, hey, want to follow? It's people that I know I've vetted. This group is somebody I vetted, I'm comfortable, and I can kick them out the club. My LinkedIn is public. My recruiter TikTok is public. Feel free to follow it. It's linked in my bio. But I'm mindful of the audience. That's going to be people in the similar space as me. It might be young people looking to get into staffing. It might just be people that are in the corporate world and are curious about my take or want a little bit of comedic relief. The differences are just the type of content you post. Is it family friendly? Would you be comfortable if your grandmother, my mom always used to joke, would you be comfortable if your grandmother and priest saw it? Now, you don't have to be religious, but it's a tee hee ha ha, because it's like your principal, for example. Would you be comfortable if your grandmother and your principal saw that? If not, don't post it. And that's a good rule of thumb. And then taking it one step forward, would you feel comfortable if you were representing the company you work for in this way? If not, don't post it. Um, I also think there's a difference between actual content. So TikTok is way goofier than some of the things that make it to LinkedIn. My videos on LinkedIn sometimes are co-posted because I feel they can live in both spaces, but I have way more out of the box things on TikTok than I would on LinkedIn. And that is, again, just audience. TikTok is full of the generation that knows what to expect when they go on that app, and it's all kinds. Versus LinkedIn, you do still have to be mindful that people are still in the framework of this should be work focused. And also just video versus stills. If I have a lot of words to say and it's in a typed format, LinkedIn is where that can live comfortably. TikTok is for video. And in my world, I'm still in the position where Instagram is for primarily still photos and sometimes stories. I don't think long form content lives there. Long form content, however, can live here, for example, hello, as well as YouTube, right? That's something we haven't really talked about. So I think just being cognizant of what kind of content you're making, who you want to see it, that determines where it should live. And it's not a hard thing to figure out once you're in the world, but I can't speak as someone who really lived without technology, right? I can't imagine being from a generation where this isn't normal. This is how I was raised and it's default, but I recognize that that's not true for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, and what do you think about? I mean, I would say even for millennials, certainly back when I was in bilingual staffing, if we had like a financial services client who was looking for a trainee, and this is probably the same for any trainee, right? There isn't a lot of work history, so they're going to look at your personal more. And there are a lot of people who did not think to make their personal profiles private. So you have
Yeah.
public profiles of them smoking a doobie, which is legal in Canada, but still, if that's your brand and you're going to a bank, they might actually think you're not as much the fit if you're publicly showing that, getting drunk and high, versus making it your private profile. Like,
Yeah.
is that something you still personally see out there for? Yeah.
100%. I actually, in a previous job to this, was tasked with just that: stalk them down and find out the dirt. And it's not from a gotcha perspective, but we worked with the government in controlled goods. And so if you have X, Y, and Z on your profile, you are not going to pass the controlled goods background. And it's actually a waste of time for us to train you up on a skill you won't be able to use, right? You're not legally allowed to. So it was more of a necessity. But the things that I would find, like, oh, that's an illegal weapon. Oh, that's illicit drug use, right?
Yeah.
Thankfully, this isn't monetized, so I can say those words. But yeah, you need to be mindful. Your Twitter account from 2016, if it's got some questionable stuff on it, clear it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, old Instagram accounts, TikTok, Facebook, MySpace, Ask FM, all of the things. Yes, you need to be, if you're posting something, you better be confident that it can live on the internet and you back it up.
Sorry, did you just say MySpace? You're aware of what that is, even?
I know. I never was allowed an account. I wasn't allowed an MSN and I wasn't allowed a MySpace,
Because
but
you were four
I was a
years old.
I really was. Yeah. Yeah, I was not allowed those. My email was forwarded to my mom. I got my first email account, I think, when I was 9 or 10, and all the messages were forwarded to my mom, and that's how I stayed in contact. But yeah, no, it is still something that runs through our mind because it was drilled into us. The internet is permanent, is what was drilled in. Like
Yeah.
your future employers, they always said. Well, now they're the current ones, and I'm one of the people doing the hiring. So it's funny how that spins around on its head. But yeah, like if you're posing up with a fish, that's fine. But maybe if you're working for an environmental registry and you're posing up with an illegal buck, think twice. Maybe don't post that. And you'd think that's common sense, but people feel a very false sense of security. Another platform I forgot to mention and should is Snapchat, because people really lean into oh, it's gone after 24 hours. As if people can't record a screen with another camera, right?
Sure.
So that's another thing is being very mindful of things that appear temporary. Unless you did it in person, consider it public.
Yeah.
So we could all spend all day, every day doing stuff taking videos, writing content, both graphic, whatever it is. We could spend all day sort of messing with this and posting to all these gajillion channels and whatnot. What do you think is the benefit? Clearly, there is some, but what do you think is the benefit? And actually, is there a benefit? So can this be monetized or tangible from a staffing perspective? So what are your guys' thoughts on that in terms of like how is it worth the time?
Yes. Rick, you want to lead and I'll follow?
Sure. I just, so on both sides of the coin again, is it worth it on the job seeker side? I'll give you an example. That narrativizing yourself right now and for the past year, it's been a really difficult market for internal recruitment, right? Internal TAs, corporate TAs. So many people were laid off. Too many people were hired, probably at higher salaries than they should have been. So it's a wild market, right? So anytime someone posts a job, there's hundreds of applicants. Some of them are very senior for the job. Some are too junior for the job. It's just a mess, right? So how do you differentiate yourself? And in that case, the advice that I was giving to people was to narrativize what your value is. Do you have a certain type of role you are good at filling? Well, if you're an expert at filling that role and this company needs that, maybe they're saving agency budget there. So you're actually saving them money by showing up and having an expertise. Example, one person was really good with sales directors, marketing directors. Okay, well, then you're a go-to-market recruiter, right? You focus on it, and that's something that people hire agencies for regularly. So you now are putting yourself to ahead of the pie. You could look for go-to-market recruitment roles. So again, the narrativizing and branding yourself and showing that on your resume, changing your LinkedIn caption to that and so on, can help you for sure in sticking out and getting the right job, or even just whatever your next job is, right? On the other front, in terms of in staffing, I mean, I'm certainly not an expert on this, but I gotta feel like personal branding is the key to candidate attraction now,
Yep.
to attracting passive candidates. Why else are they getting back to you other than that they know you in some way or they like you? They're getting emails from everybody all the time. Like, who are they gonna? How are they gonna decide who to get in touch with? Right? There's one California company, I forget their name now, but they're trying to have this thing where it's a passive candidate auction kind of style, right? And so people pay $20 to have a little profile and be like, choose me to represent you. Right? This is a thing that's actually happening in California. But that just feels like a microcosm of what's really happening, in my opinion. I feel like if they look at your profile, or if your outreach is individually interesting enough, and then they look at your profile and they go like, I trust this person, I like them. It's kind of what's really happening, right?
Mm.
So I feel like the value will be the type people will get back to you instead of the 5 others. That's my 2 cents.
So you're talking about LinkedIn specifically. So what value do the other platforms have around that then? Should we spend lots of time there?
As recruiters?
Yes, as recruiters.
I mean, just before I hand it all over to Emma, I don't want to monopolize this, but I think it depends what you're recruiting, right? But like a lot of people in IT have done some great things back in the day working with Facebook. I know people in creative are really good at using X and Instagram to get people, depending on who your audience is. Mm-hmm. So, but recruiting recruiters, I think LinkedIn is obviously the place because they're on LinkedIn. But I think if you're not in rec to rec, then you've got to choose the tool that, and there's new ones popping up, new forums popping up too, where you can create a profile and meet people. There's a lot of gamer ones, it's all the unemployed gamers to meet each other popping up. So I think it's like, know your audience, right? Where do they hang out? Go hang out there, kind of thing.
Yeah, 100%. I was just taking notes. If you see me looking down, I'm an old-fashioned gal. So I was taking notes so I didn't lose my train of thought. There's a couple pieces that are valuable. One would be new networks. So you're reaching people that may or may not, for whatever reason, have hit the LinkedIn train. Mm-hmm. Specifically, if you're in a vertical where it's not likely that you're going to end up with folks on LinkedIn. For example, tradespeople. Yeah, they might be scrolling, right? I know a lot of tradespeople. I was in the trades before this. Might be scrolling, but they may not be posting on LinkedIn. So you can catch people in a different network. The second would be that it confirms who the heck you are, right? It's easy to fake one account, but the likelihood that someone would go to the effort of faking 4 congruent accounts would be very strange. So it gives a false sense, but a true or false sense that you are who you say you are. You're diversifying your platform value,
Mhm.
especially important for people. We were talking about this before. TikTok, for example, all of a sudden went down in a country, or in your country, and that's where all of your content is, and it's gone. Well, that you're starting from scratch. So if you're slowly diversifying your network over multiple platforms, especially if they're not linked by a one owner, it's probably
Yep.
a good idea.
Yep.
And the fourth is just on a smaller to larger scale, depending on what industry you're in, you can actually just monetize your content straight up. So if you're in recruitment and you want to partner with a recruitment software, you want to partner with fellow firms, whatever it may be, there's actual money on the table to be made above and beyond simple placements. Sales as well, right? We see Selling Sarah all the time. Big fan, Julie and I don't know about Rick, but love it. And yeah, she's monetizing that content, right? Whether she's sponsored by a pen, a person, doesn't matter. That's a huge income flow. So I think you're leaving money on the table if you're going to invest all this time and effort to not consider that as well.
Yeah, partnerships.
What advice? So I think I'm going back to this sort of bravery, like, and just like, okay, going for it, jumping into the swimming pool. What advice would you guys give to someone? And I don't mean to be the interviewer here, but you are both clearly younger than me, and it's like this is I think important, because I think this is a lot of the population that just don't have that level of bravery that goes. And I haven't been brought up with this, so I'm just like, I feel very uncomfortable in this world. How can you get over that?
Yeah.
It's a good question. I mean, for me personally, I grew up in front of people, right? Like I was a kid, as if you can't tell already. I was a ham. I liked doing storytelling, public speaking, acting, debating. Put me on stage in front of people. I did music titles. I did like whatever, straight through school, and then dropped out of college to start a record label and was, you know what I mean? Like always on stage in front of people. But there is something different from putting yourself in front of people when you have content, because you're hiding behind a song or whatever else, right? I'm not there to be me. I'm there to do stand up, or you know what I mean?
Right.
So there is something different about being, it's a kind of a vulnerability, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that being open with yourself about that and having to come to terms with some of the feelings that one has about being vulnerable publicly is a must. I think that otherwise there'll be a mental block that will cause you to rationalize 100,000 reasons why it's not worth it. That's what happened to me. That's what happens to everybody, I would imagine, is sort of get a long list. No, but here's the reason why, and I didn't have time, and it's not worth it because of this, and here's why I think. And I've done that. I did it in our meetings at points about video. You'd ask, well, why are you not doing videos, Rick? And I had 100 reasons. But I think ultimately it's because there's an uncomfortable feeling about that level of vulnerability. And I think, a little bit of soul searching is required. But really, it's about doing it. And hopefully this is a bit of a forum for people to come on, even in the panels that we have, to sort of see that it's not that big a deal. It took me a long time to be a convert, but actually going out and doing it and having a bit of a community around you makes it a little easier, I think. And then seeing the benefits and kind of guessing and checking. You can kind of look back at yourself and go like, you know what? Why did I say that? That was so stupid. Like, I don't even think that, because there's weird stuff about it, right? And I think that the best way to hone it down is to just do it. And doing it with friends and colleagues to make it easier, then great.
I think on that note, I don't know if it's like highly translatable, but we're doing some cold calling together as a group. And I think that certain people on the team are perhaps more or less comfortable with that. And I realize it's an entirely different thing, but it still makes you feel vulnerable. So there's a vulnerability around cold calling because you just don't know what's going to happen or what someone's going to say. And if you're unprepared, then, blah, blah, blah. But as a group, it feels a lot more cozy and a lot more acceptable and much more likely to get done, because it feels like you're part of something that everyone's in the same boat. So that's I wouldn't say necessarily a tactic, but that's a way to sort of get to the end result of doing something that you're nervous or uncomfortable or worried or not feeling brave about. It's doing it together might be in some way helpful, or surrounding yourself with people that are comfortable in that area, and then hopefully some of that will, you know, brush off onto you once you've picked other people's brains.
Yeah.
100%. Emma, how are you feeling about the cold calling?
Yeah, that was a great question. I wanted to, I'm going to answer the first question and then the second question because they tie together. So the first question Julie asked was to do with like, how do you kind of get over that fear and that
Yeah.
anxiety? And that's something that I had, funnily enough, though I'm similar to Rick. I grew up competing in public speaking competitions. I grew up dance, gymnastics. I love to be on stage. I love to have people listen to me. I know that about me. I don't necessarily think that's a bad quality. It can be, but in this industry, it's not.
Yeah.
I think what I did, other than therapy and all the things behind the scenes to make yourself, you know, decenter in other people's opinion of you, um, if you have to still be in a place where other people's validation counts, which to some extent it always will, I try and think of the one or two people that younger me would have profited. For example, if I can help even one post grad junior that's stressing out and seeing me helps them in any capacity, whether it's their resume, whether it's just a little bit of a reprieve, whatever it may be, that makes it worth it for me.
There you go.
Because when I was younger, I was always online, as many people my age were. And there's these role models and people that I saw that were small creators, mid creators, big creators that made a big difference in who I am. Additionally, there's always going to be the noise of negativity, and specifically, and this might be a hot take, but again, if you're going to say on the internet, back it, I will. There's always going to be negativity, and there's always going to be a lot of men talking, right? LinkedIn is just like any other corporate sphere where it's a lot of men, specifically usually white, yapping about really important things in their opinion. And there's something really freeing about adding your 2 cents as somebody who isn't the default demographic of a space. So I love it when I see content creators of all different languages, shapes, forms, backgrounds, races, genders, whatever it may be, contributing, because then anybody can see themselves online. So that also helps. And I'm not talking from like, oh, I'm super diverse, blah, 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 not pulling that card, but I just think it's nice to have different people's opinions online. Now, to answer the cold calling question, for some reason, that's a whole other beast. No amount of therapy in the world could have prepared me for just picking up the phone and talking to people off the cuff. But I will
Sorry,
say,
contextualize. Is this your first time having to cold call, or have you cold called at other jobs in the past? I don't even know this myself.
this is my first time having a cold
Okay.
call. I'm trying to think. Yeah, no, I dealt with inbound rage calls when I managed a gift basket company, but I've never had to outbound sell like that in my life. It's always incoming, right? I can put out fires like nobody's business. I can talk myself in circles, but calling, just starting to talk to somebody who's like, "What do you want?" is incredibly intimidating. I'm going to give slight credit to online content creators such as Sarah, as well as there's a woman named Shelby who is like a little bit younger than me that makes content. And I've been watching your TikToks nonstop about cold calling and scripting. And then a lot of credit I'm going to give to my teammates because I've watched Rick do this, I've watched Julie do this, I've watched Sergey do this. And you do pick up on scripts and confidence from your team. So if I could give any advice to a junior that's terrified to cold call, it sounds crazy, like, oh, do it in front of your boss. That sounds like actually nightmare fuel, but it really does help when you trust your team because let them go first. Don't go first. Let them go first.
Yeah.
Watch them, hear what they have to say, how they navigate objections, and then just do your best. Also, I try and just do it from a place of I'm actually calling to add value. I'm not calling to clean your windows, right? I'm calling to check in. How's your job doing? And can I help you get a better one? I don't think that's really that cold of a call. That's pretty warm to me.
I think,
and it helps.
yeah, I would say though, Emma, that if you need your windows cleaned, there's a lot of value in the window cleaner calling. So I think it really does depend. But to your point, I think it's in your head, which we're off topic here, and the dog has got an opinion. But it's like whatever's in your head around either writing something, so content that you're going to publish about you, or making a cold call. Your brain actually allows you to A, do it, or B, publish it, and then how you feel about it afterwards. So it's all around what's going up here. So whatever mechanism or tactic or thought or comfort you get from whichever way to get past that, I think will get you jumping into the pool at the deep end.
Yeah, it's very inner saboteur, isn't it, Rick?
It is inner saboteur, it's called RuPaul. But it is, I think that, we had, again, when I was in tech sales, we had all these people fly up from California to do these trainings for us I was in the hunter team for a while, and then just an account manager, account executive, whatever. But so they would always go through the sort of the psychology of it, which I didn't realize that stuff would stick with me 20 years later now, 20 plus years later now. But it does, because it interestingly, like, if you are taking inbound calls like you were, Emma, of somebody who's upset, these are like, consumer or whatever kind of calls, right? If people are angry, that's a much more taxing job at the core, right? Because it's only negativity that you're dealing with, and it eats away at your soul. But we're less scared to do it often because there's pretense, right? They're not angry at you, they're angry at the company. You're not on the line. It's the same thing as we said before. You could forward things all day long on LinkedIn, but it's not you who's on the line. When you cold call somebody, there's no pretense. So instantly, psychologically, what you're selling is yourself before anything else. Your tone of voice, whatever. So you are the thing that is, you perceive that you are being rejected as a human if someone doesn't want to talk to you, because they don't know your business. They don't know, so it's weird, but that we're so scared of having to put ourselves on the line at most people that we would rather often take something that will only be negativity just because there's pretext and you can hide behind the company and not be personally involved. But on the flip side, it's like, if you're comfortable selling yourself, knowing that, like you're saying, Emma, if you're calling candidates, you're not asking them for their credit card number. No. You're not asking them for anything. Really, it's not a sale at all. You're offering them something. You're offering them your time and service to give them information about what's out there on the job market and potentially get them a better job than they had before. Yep. Which I think is super powerful and positive compared to even calling them to pitch them a job. Then it makes it seem like you want something from them. But at the core, I think picturing it as like, you get me. This is what you're getting. I'm calling to offer me. You seem cool. I'm offering myself, the knowledge, the time, the whatever, to go find these things for you. And I'm doing it for you for free. You know what I mean? Which is so it's like, it's always a happy call, really.
It really is. And even with a business, you're calling and saying, hey, I recognize that your business is someone or is so strong that I want to align with it, right? Because we don't call businesses we don't want to work with.
Exactly.
So I'm recognizing your business has value. I'm recognizing your business appears, we don't know, but appears to be in a position where you're successful enough to grow. Can we help you do that so you can keep making money in the meantime?
On spec, half the time.
On spec half the time. On good faith, and and so I do think that we're very fortunate that we're in a sales environment, but it's not a sell that's very hard compared to others. I think the sell that's hard is getting over that it is you. So rejection therapy is what it feels like, of just a no, a no, a no. And I will say that one content creator I mentioned earlier, Shelby, she said, every no you should be excited out, because statistically, every no is actually bringing you closer to a yes. So every time you hear no, just know a yes is around the corner, and that's really helpful.
And she's absolutely right. And that is, this is, taking the personal and the personality out of it. It is all about numbers. So it is all about numbers and how many you do, because the law of averages, you will get some sort of yes at some point if you try for hard enough and for long enough. And I think that's the same with content and some sort of action or reaction or benefit from the content or the postings or the effort that you're making from a social media and a marketing perspective. If you do enough of it, at some point you will get something back. So I asked the question earlier, is it worth it? Just to see what you guys said, but it is worth it. It absolutely is worth it. And I don't think you have to do much for very long. If it's the right type of content with the right type of quality, you will get inbound leads, whether it's candidates or clients or both, dependent on what your angle is, if there is an angle. So it absolutely is worthwhile.
Yeah. I also had a quick thing that just popped into my head. And I'll say it briefly because I know we're coming to time, but it also is worth it as a human being, because if you are putting all this effort and content into a brand, and for whatever reason the brand dissolves, you don't work at the brand, you quit the brand, whatever, it's kind of gone. It's like putting all of your information into a database and locking yourself out of it.
Yep.
So there is value in investing into things that you own, right? Like your education, your social media, things that you can hold on to, absolutely is worth it, because you can take it with you wherever you go.
And it becomes your calling card.
Yeah.
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 It does, and it compounds, right? And you get better at it too. And like the benefits from having the bravery to put yourself out there and having the resilience and overcoming, rejection and all this kind of stuff, those benefits echo out into your life and will help anyone upskill themselves too. It's not just about the immediate goal of getting a placement or whatever else. You can get better at stuff, right, from doing it. You actually become better at dealing with people. You realize a lot of these things aren't as much of a big deal. Like you said, Emma, the quote, and this is the thing they do in sales trainings a lot, right? Every no is one step closer to a yes, which is true. But also that is true of sales, like direct sales, I would say 100%, right? It's true of all things, but especially in direct sales where your goal is to get a sale on the call or on a second call. And by that, I mean, give me your credit card number, sir,
Yep.
or whatever, right? That kind of sale. But when you're selling yourself, I was trained anyway that there is kind of no such thing as no. No is just a conversation because there's no product to say no to. I'm a person. So you're saying no to an idea, and that's fine because we say yes, we have a conversation. So no is not to me, it's to the idea. But when you're selling yourself, no is not the end of anything. It's not, you don't need to get closer to a yes. You're in a conversation. So there's an inherent yes to even someone saying, no, I'm not interested.
Yep.
And the mentality that I was taught was to always think, that's the reason I'm calling you today as a response. You're not interested. Well, why aren't you interested? Well, I already have a great job. Well, that's the reason I'm calling you today. You're doing amazing. Let's find out about that. Blah blah blah. I make too much money. I work from home. But whatever the objection is, I already have a vendor. In your head, if you're like, well, that's why I'm calling. Tell me more about that, right? You're just in a conversation. So it's a lot more powerful when you can get a hold of the like I'm selling myself thing versus I'm selling a job. I'm selling a product. If they say no to that, the conversation's over. But if you're selling yourself, no is an invitation to continue talking. It's more of a like you're in a dialogue with the person at that point. If we can keep that, it's sometimes it's hard to keep that mentality. I'm certainly not perfect at it, but it's empowering, I think, to look at it that way.
And I think just on that note, sort of translating it back to sort of social media, if you can put a post up or whatever you're doing, let's say on LinkedIn, if you have some sort of interaction from someone, then that also is a thumbs up, is like an engagement which now, if you don't leverage that, it was almost like, it's almost like that, how many times did I call? Well, I've called twice, but now I'm not going to call again. So actually, what was the point of calling in the first place when we sort of talk about these two situations of cold calling versus social media sort of marketing? If you don't engage with the person that's just engaged with whatever you've said or the content that you put up there, it's like a bit of a lost opportunity. Will they actually then, will it mean something? Will it sort of transpose into something? Maybe not immediately, but what you have done is you've brokered a connection there to yourself or to your business, whichever it is, which could result in something. But again, I think it's then following through on that, building the relationship, because the hard part, the content is done. You've achieved the job, you've got engagement, and now you just need to sort of work that through to some sort of conclusion.
100%.
Yeah.
That's
Either
cool.
conclusion or another open door, right?
Yep.
Even a no, even a straight up no of I'm not even working anymore. I'm no longer in staffing, and in fact, I'm retired on a beach in Belize. Okay, well, you were in staffing. Who do you know? Right?
Yeah.
There's always some sort of open door in this industry where they may know someone else. So it's the same with social media. Like it may pop up on their page 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, months from now. Just let it live there. Let it do its job. Passive income. Right?
And before we cap it too, you mentioned this, and it wasn't one of the topics, the angles, but the other angle too is it's a two-way street, engaging with the social media of others, right?
Yep.
Getting everybody to engage with their content is powerful too. It's a way to just
Mhm.
directly engage in conversation, to not
Yes.
forget.
Yes, if you want a job, engage with hiring managers' content. They will see you.
Or if you're in sales, engage with the company's content as well, get their attention.
Yeah, but don't just put "I'm interested." Looks like a default. Don't do that. You look like a bot. Put something meaningful.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, well, by saying that, you're actually giving the person something to do. It's like that's not the point. It's like you're the one looking for something. So it's like engage in a meaningful way, and don't give them another job to sort of put on their things to do list. It's like
Yeah.
you'll probably go to the bottom.
I've got a comment here, which is, I have to head out to another meeting. Wanted to express thanks for such an informative webinar. Talk again soon. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. We also probably have to head out to a meeting, I'm sure,
We
if we
do.
looked at our calendars.
We do.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and hope to see you next Wednesday.
Yeah, see you then.
Thanks,
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye, guys.